Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 109 of Podcast vs. Enemies, a Destiny podcast dedicated to the PvE sandbox. My name is Impetus, and I am joined by my usual co-hosts, Court and St. Kabir. Court, what did you do in Destiny 2 last week?
Hello, lads. Just a little bit of GMs. Done my fair amount of Iron Banner. I am certainly bannered out. Got some more Salvation Edge experience under my belt. At this moment, I need to double check the next time I log in. I can apply my remaining deep sights to some of my spare nullifies, so I should be able to craft it. And I'm looking forward to run around with that. I know we are to cover that in a future episode, all the new Salvation Raid weapons, but that is the one that I am really looking forward to. Saint, how are you doing, man?
I am doing good. It's been a pretty good week. A lot of playlist stuff this week. Yeah, Iron Banner, Gambit, Grandmasters, catching up on a lot of seasonal stuff. A lot of the fail-safe, actual episode content and just your regular content from these other playlists, I kind of fallen behind on. Just there's so many quests and things like that to go through with the expansion. Caught up on a bunch of that. Farmed out some of the weapons you may or may not be hearing us talk about this episode. Also been spending a bunch of time prepping for the last, I believe will be the last two sessions of the D&D campaign that I've been on or been DMing for the past, I don't know, probably like 5 months or so. It's been a decent chunk of a campaign. We got the penultimate session tonight and then the last one coming up just about 2 weeks after that, which I'm really excited for because a friend of mine that originally taught me, basically how to be a DM and run the game is going to be, just so happens to be coming into town. So he's going to be stopping by and playing the role of our lead villain, which I'm super stoked about. This should be a lot of fun. Court, how about you, man? Is Salvation's Edge, Craft and Nullifies, Impetus, how about you?
Yeah, did not do Salvation's Edge this week. Just wasn't in the schedule. I have been slowly but surely working on various quests and things. The seasonal quests, again, I play all 3 characters, so I like to knock that stuff out. And it's definitely been nice to get all that stuff. Like I've got all the seasonal, or the episode armor, I should say, unlocked for all 3 characters. I don't have a lot of red borders from the episode weapons, so I think I'll probably tackle that next week. But it's also kept me from doing a lot of other stuff that many people have been doing that you don't typically only play on 1 or 2 characters. So this past week, I finally did get Kvostov unlocked. I've been playing around with that. Gun is very strong. I love it. It will definitely have a place in my arsenal, but I am not a fan of that ricochet sound. It fires. I don't know what it is about it. I've been trying to figure it out, but it's been, it's so persistent, and there's a double sound effect whenever you hit a shielded enemy with a ricochet bullet, and it just drives me crazy. And I know some people are laughing at me when I say that, but I can't explain it. It just rubs me the wrong way, but I will continue to use the gun because it's a very good exotic weapon. So that's what I've been working on. I have started unlocking the remaining prismatic abilities for my hunter through the 6 adventures. So I think I have my melee and my grenade fully unlocked, and now I just need to do the supers and the aspects. But definitely need to focus on the episode weapons, start getting a few more red borders, because there are some things that I want to play with and try out, especially before we get even more weapons added to that pool come this following week. All right, Saint, who do we have to thank this episode?
First up, we want to shout out some new patrons of the show: Haldor, Ignatian, and Zax Attacks. We also have Fernando, Will, John S., Paul, and Rhett. Thank you all for joining us, supporting the show, enabling us to do what we love. Also, as always, want to give a shout out to our PvE Grandmasters, Dark Wizard 85, David, Deacon, I'm K. Rose, Jellied Puppy, The Shazzle, The Puckster, The Mirror, and This Moment, as well as our continuing support from D&B sponsors, Asky and Monk, I'm K. Rose, and This Moment. As a reminder, you can send us all kinds of feedback directly to our socials via the Discord server or the @PodVersusEnemies Twitter or our Patreon. Positive, critical, and constructive feedback always help with how we present the show, break down topics, and all kinds of stuff like that. much more in the PvE sandbox that there is to cover. And sometimes, we need a little feedback on exactly what it is that people want us to hone in on. We want to extend a special thanks and appreciation to everybody that supports PvE by downloading, listening, and discussing our show each week, and especially those supporting us directly via Patreon. Speaking of which, if you would like to support us, you can click on the link to Patreon found in the show notes of this episode, where you get access to members-only channels in our Discord server, behind-the-scene contents, text write-ups of weapon breakdowns, input on future of the show, and more. Court, what are we talking about today in episode 109?
Yeah, so we've got a quick recap regarding Act 2. So by the time this episode goes out, you'll all be either downloading or waiting in a queue to get into Act 2, or you'll be playing it. But the bulk of this episode will be dedicated to part 1 of our playlist weapon breakdowns. As for kind of housekeeping, we don't have much here in terms of housekeeping and any other kind of MISC updates. We do have some posts up on the Patreon. If you have been following that, we've got the Mahi's HC4 and the Dead Grammary 4 from the episode 108. That's the previous episode. I've also put up a little highlight for in regards to sort of science or DPS. That's the Glaive Compendium. If you want to check that out, I'll be posting that kind of DPS highlight maybe once every 3 or 4 weeks, and we'll kind of go through a bunch of some really great quality content over on the science side. Over on the Patreon side, we did put up our weekly sort of ask your feedback, ask your questions. We did get a couple here. So one from Robert, who was talking about the exotic class items. Obviously, we haven't covered that yet. It is coming in a future episode. We're just kind of waiting for us to gather as many rolls as possible before we sit down and discuss some prismatic plus exotic class item build. The same goes for Ergo Sum, which comes from Brian, also asking about kind of great picks, some weapon breakdowns dedicated to that. Because yeah, it's one weapon, but it's got a bunch of exotic perks and obviously the sword frames attached to it. So again, much like the exotic class items, we'll discuss them in a future episode as well. One question here from New Chemist, who was also kind of one-upped by Deacon. Solar Snipers is a must at some point before the new artifact mods come out. So yeah, we'll touch on that real quick here. Impetus, what Solar Snipers are we going to be kind of highlighting for the new act?
So the exotic ones I think are going to be pretty straightforward. We all have been playing with at some point Still Hunt, which is our brand new exotic solar sniper, special solar sniper. I do need to throw that clarification out there. And it is getting tuned a little bit. It has been very spicy, very, very strong here. Still going to be a superb choice for hunters, especially to pair with Celestial Nighthawk. I would even argue for our Warlock and Titan players as well. If you haven't played the exotic quest to unlock Still Hunt, you absolutely should. It is a very strong special weapon. Definitely the best exotic sniper rifle in the game. I know Whisper fans probably not too happy with me saying that, but I'm sorry, Still Hunt kind of eats your lunch even after the tuning. However, if you are a Whisper stan, Whisper is still very viable. Definitely a solar exotic sniper rifle. Very much going to be strong as well for those longer DPS phases. I know that is the pick for Oryx, definitely. I remember using that both in the regular version of King's Fall and then also in the Pantheon fight against Oryx as well. Still going to be very viable for those longer damage phases. Let's also touch on our legendary options here. We're going to mention 4 here specifically. We're not going to talk too much about them, just kind of mention the top roles here. We've got Uzume RR4 as our most recent pick here. That does have an adept version. I think that was the drop actually for this past week here, the week after you're listening to this episode. And that does roll 4th times the charm or clown cartridge in Calm 3, and then Vorpal Weapon or Precision Instrument in Calm 4. It's an adaptive frame. I should throw that out there. Definitely a decent combo. Again, any combination of those Calm 3 and 4 perks will lend you a very solid roll here. Adaptives, though, on the whole, are not quite as strong as our rapid fire and our aggressive frame sniper rifles, but we have a few rapid fires that we'll talk about. I do want to also point out Last Foray that came out in Season of the Deep, and that is a world drop. It does get the role of Envious Assassin and Focused Fury. Very, very nice as well here. But our rapid fire solar sniper rifles are currently kind of king of the crop. They have deeper ammo reserves as a part of the frame here, which allows them to last for a very long time for sustained damage, kind of similar to how Whisper of the Worm really shines in those longer damage phases as well. So we've got Twilight Oath as one of our more recent picks that came out in Season of the Wish, our last season here. That could get Envious, Assassin, and then you have a choice between Vorpal Weapon, Precision Instrument, and then let's not forget High Ground as well. That was newly buffed coming into the final shape so that it doesn't have quite the same stipulations as it used to. That can be very strong in a Witness style fight when High Ground does get procced against the Witness. If you weren't aware of that in Salvation's Edge, you can naturally proc that just standing on that center platform to deal damage against the Witness. So that's where it's viable as one example, but you do have your more kind of classic perennial picks of Precision Instrument and then Vorpal Weapon to pair with Envious Assassin in column 3, and that's Twilight Oath. And then finally, an older pick here, definitely harder to get as a crafted option nowadays because it can only drop as a red border from the Seraph Shield exotic mission, but that would be the Ikelos sniper rifle with 4 times the charm or Overflow in column 3, and then Focused Fury, or as a backup pick here, High Impact Reserves. Very, very solid. Again, the rapid fires, just with naturally more reserves, are going to be better than our adaptive frame sniper rifles like Uzume and Last Foray. And then aggressive frames are kind of in the middle. They're slightly behind rapid fires, but still quite fine as well. We have not had a recent solar aggressive frame sniper rifle. We have Luna Regolith 3, but that is the playlist weapon. It has a ton of perks in column 3 and 4. That can be very hard to chase down a decent roll of that, but you could look at something like Clown Cartridge or Vorpal Weapon. The 4 that I've mentioned before that, though, would be a little bit easier to acquire, again, assuming you've got Last Foray to drop over the following seasons since Season of the Deep. So those are our solar snipers, just in a nutshell there to talk about, kind of things to be aware of here. Let's get into our thoughts on Act 2, a recap of what was mentioned in that live stream, and I'll pass you over to Saint to cover the news that we have learned about.
Yeah, so we actually have quite a bit coming with Act 2 of our first episode, and I wasn't expecting a live stream, but I get why they did it to kind of set the tone of expectations and stuff like that, so we'll highlight some stuff here, and then we'll go back and discuss a few of these upcoming changes in a little bit more detail. Starting off with new content, we got 3 new battlegrounds. Delve and Conduit will both be with the launch this coming Tuesday, and then Core is the third one, and that will be releasing on July 23rd. They described this briefly as Journey to the Center of Nessus, which I'm pretty keen on that. Nessus is a really interesting just destination. They've been delving deep into what's going on there, metaphorically and literally. So pretty keen on that. We also had, friend of the show, longtime supporter Chris Proctor on the stream talking about some new weapons and stuff coming to the game. And we got 3 pretty spicy weapons that we maybe talking about next episode or the episode after. As soon as we can get our hands on these and start using them, we're very keen on these weapons. Starting out with Barrent Action, it's a solar rocket sidearm. Corasion, a arc heavy burst pulse rifle, so same as the new Raid Pulse and the new Trials Pulse that you've seen come out, that new archetype. And then finally, you have one more Dawn weapon also being added, which is Perfect Paradox, a kinetic rapid fire shotgun. Also some really interesting stuff on there and some solid synergy with its origin trait, but more on that later. Next up, we had a review of the Artifact, which includes some really spicy stuff. Speaking of solar snipers, like New Chemist and Deacon were asking about. So they're asking about solar snipers because in the Artifact, we've got Anti-Barrier Sniper. First time we've seen that in a long time. Scavenger mods discounted, so 1 cost scavenger mods on your legs. Incendiary Rifle rounds, which is precision sniper hits apply Scorch, I believe. And then Solar Fulmination, which is coming back from Season 17, Season of the Haunted. And it's a very powerful perk for increasing the, I believe it damage and radius of ignitions? Yeah, I'm getting some nods here. Really strong trait, especially with the right artifact mods, the right builds and weapons. You can really get a lot of utility out of that. And then finally, Sniper's Meditation. based on some early testing from the game footage that we saw in this stream, it looks to be about 3% per stack and max at 5 stacks, which means 15% for hitting, 5 shots in a row. Think of this like a artifact version of precision instrument, right? Specifically for snipers, and that's kind of the idea here. Now, Court, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that damage traits like this stack multiplicatively. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I'm harping back to a comment Rodney. We had Rodney on way back in our second dev episode, and he made the point of they're quite happy putting these kind of stackable outlier. I know a lot of the community call these outlier damage stacking buffs on the artifact, so I have every faith that this will be stackable as well. We see other stuff, there's things in the artifact right now that don't stack, like Radiant Orbs, because it gives you Radiant. Expanding Abyss is a bit of a different one, because it just makes your weakens more potent. So they do like to go a bit kind of crazy, not as crazy as they used to, but they do like to add these kind of stackable damage buffs to the artifacts. If this was maybe, if it was maybe a surge system, or if it was an empowering buff, so if it went up to 35%, we'd be able to tell that immediately. That was probably not a stackable damage buff, but because this goes up to 15%, I'm quite safe to say this will be stackable with everything, including your surges, your empowering buffs, your debuffs, your weapon perks, all that jazz.
Yeah, a lot there, a lot to be capitalized on. We'll round this out with a little bit of a more discussion on this section, because we got some sandbox changes that were also teased in this announcement, and there's some pretty spicy stuff here. So first up, correcting an issue that allowed swapping between regular armor mods and reserve mods to enable a higher ammo count than current maximum. So this is never intended. Basically, this means when you rally with a reserve chest piece and you swap off of it, you will be losing those. Your max will go then down to what your current max reserve count should be in game, and it won't last like it would now at the moment, and is the pattern in raids, right? Reserve ammunition for all weapon types has been increased by up to 15%, with weapons with low reserves having their weapon type getting a larger buff, and the reserve mods have been decreased by 1 to compensate for this. Unsure how exactly this is going to play out. Any comments, lads?
Court, any thoughts?
Well, I was going to put a little note here to say this is quite a substantial change. I think if you don't already follow Mossy Max on Twitter or in the Discord, I think he was kind of pulling his hair out, because the main point of this fix is it's applying to pretty much everything in the game, and it varies by weapon. It does say here in the tweet, it's talking about those with lower reserves obviously benefit larger, which makes sense. I think they've always done that kind of thing just to kind of equalize everything upwards. But this applies to everything. And if you do follow my spreadsheets, I do have a dedicated section to rocket launchers, and that will apply it to all of these rockets. So, to take an example here, reserve for let's see. Let's talk about Crowning Duologue is our upcoming Solstice weapon. So right now at base, it's 9, 10, 11, 12 with your reserve mods. This will probably mean it goes to 10, 11, 12, 12. 12 is still going to be the cap, but it's still very a substantial change. And that's just for rockets. It's going to be a lot more substantial for other weapons. And just as a kind of final note, you probably hear me saying this all the time, stuck record, but the higher your reserve count, the higher total ammo capacity your weapon can get, the more ammo you'll pick up. So this is a direct buff to ammo pickup as well. So it remains to be seen how this will be realistically felt next week, or I should say this week, when we actually get into the sandbox, and how it impacts all of these weapons, all exotics as well, that don't generally get kind of reserve changes in the background. But yeah, it's a very interesting fix. them offsetting the whole kind of unintended functionality with a buff. Very happy to see that, and yeah, very interesting. I feel sorry for Mossy, who has to do a lot of testing when this goes out.
Yeah.
It's a good thing he's got that really long episode to help him get all that stuff squared away for episode 2 when the reserves get thrown out the window again. So,
Oh, man. All right.
all right, I'll cover the rest of the...
Yeah.
Yeah, so in addition to all the fun artifact mods for sniper rifles, Bungie's also gone ahead and reduced flinch in PvE, specifically, for sniper rifles by 50%. So that is just versus combatants in PvE. I really want to stress that part here. I know snipers are a terror in PvP, but we don't have to worry about that. We can be the terror in PvE. So that should make aiming down sights with any kind of sniper rifle, but especially your solar sniper rifles, a tad easier during damage phases. You won't get flinched off those sweet, crispy precision shots moving forward. And then additionally, speaking of precision shots here, Ariana's Vow, the sniper rifle that's actually a hand cannon, has got its damage, or will have its damage, buffed by 67% versus barrier shields. Now, we did a little bit of testing ahead of recording the episode here, just trying to get an idea of how much of a buff this is compared to where it is currently dealing damage in various difficulties. We do believe that this should make it always a one-shot barrier shield pop in all difficulties. And again, we've tested this kind of pre-buff here. We could not find a non-Solar Surge Master or GM activity, so we're not quite sure how that will line up. Again, we're just looking at it on paper here, but we do believe that it should be able to one-shot. But right now, Solar Surges in the Master and GM activities does allow it to one-shot barriers. So we're hoping that after the buff and in non-Solar Surged content, it should still one-shot. But again, we weren't able to test that or get some idea of that this week when we were recording our episode. Additionally, they are removing all stat penalties from adept mods, so they should be flat bonuses to their given stats. I think that will be, again, a big deal in PvP. I was trying to look at some of the adept mods with stat penalties. None of them seem to really factor a ton for PvE. I couldn't find an adept weapon that I had where some of those penalties were really discounting the mod in question. But yes, for any of your adept weapons, the adept mod should be a bit of a better bump to the performance of your gun, whichever one you choose here. And then our final one here that we're actually going to take a little bit of a sidecar here and talk about some of these weapons. The aggressive frame scout rifles, or as they call them at Bungie, the Tex Mechanica scout rifles, are getting their base damage increased by 30%, that is 30% in PvE, which should make them kind of juicers. Am I right, Saint?
Oh yeah, it's time. And I just took Time Worn Wayfarer and just dragged its name through the mud like 2 weeks ago, a week ago. I can't remember which episode it was exactly. And they've always been cool weapons, and now they're not only going to be cool weapons, they're going to be weapons that deal moderate to very good damage in the right scenarios. And we absolutely love to see lower, non-used weapon archetypes getting big buffs like this. So let's talk about a few, what are you looking for now? If you got old aggressive scouts in your vault, or you can now craft Time Worn Wayfarer and you're not sure what to put on it, let's recap. We said we would give some recap on this. I'll start off with Time Worn Wayfarer because I owe it, I owe it some justice here. In column 3, we got Shoot to Loot, Dual Loader, and Heal Clip. Shoot to Loot, a classic, just utility in PvE, right? Heal Clip is pretty interesting because of how often you can hit quick reloads and how often you can be triggering that cure for yourself and getting Ember of Benevolence proc maybe if you happen to be on a strong solar build. But Dual Loader is super interesting because Imtis originally pointed this out to me, that when you enhance Dual Loader on aggressive scout rifles, it becomes Quad Loader. And that really circumvents such a weak point of this archetype that I think this is going to be very strong. I've currently just been using Shoot to Loot on this weapon because it interacts with the Radiolaria pools and Incandescent, but I think I may be going Quad Loader, and then in column 4, damage side, you've got Incandescent, Desperate Measures, and High Ground. As a reminder, High Ground goes up to 25% now at 3 stacks, whether you've triggered that from its original kind of proper trigger, shooting from at least a meter above whatever your other target is, or just getting 3 add kills in that time period for up to 7 seconds will trigger that up to 25% buff, which is honestly quite strong for just getting some kills. Desperate Measures can outdamage that by 5% at up to 30% if you're getting ability kills after weapon kills. So kind of the trade-off of slightly more setup for just slightly more benefit. But something that I will also mention in favor of High Ground is that Enhanced High Ground adds +5 reload onto your stats, which again, aggressive scouts really need. And yeah, I don't know, all of a sudden Time Worn Wayfarer went from just looking good to being good, and we'd love to see that. Court, we've also got some other scouts. What would you be putting on there?
Yeah, so next up we've got the Prophet, which is from Trials. Did we do, this might have been an episode I was off or absent for, but did we even cover the Prophet back then when it first came out?
I had very little reason to,
yeah.
so
I don't know if we did.
But yeah, anyway, so if you do have a Prophet lying around, it's still an active weapon dropping, whether it's the just the normal version or the Adept one. But yeah, we've got a little bit kind of a different perk combo compared to Time Worn and the other one of Long Arm. We do have Outlaw in column 3, Keep Away, very apt for a scout rifle. And we've also got Demo, and that's one pairing with Headstone that I would probably be taking into some GM content. Very easy to proc Demo plus Headstone, then mix that in with the various stasis fragments and aspects that we've got. Just thinking of the one where you destroy a crystal, yeah, you get additional base grenade regen rate for 6 seconds. Very easy to do that if you've got a kind of grenade-based build. Thinking with Renewable Grasp Hunters, obviously, very easy to keep that sustained up, so you've always got a grenade. We also have Explosive Payload in column 4. We've got Golden Tricorn as well, if you can get your stasis kills. Again, more thinking it's more apt towards Hunters with their longer range stasis melee and then kill clips. So it's obviously a little bit more focused towards the PvP sandbox, but there's some options here if you can get one. And you also have 3 origin traits with Alacrity, 1 Quiet Moment, and of course text balanced stock. So quite kind of an array of perks here. Next up, we've got Long Arm, which is from Spire of the Watcher. That's our very first aggressive frame, way back. So column 3, we have Subsistence, Rapid Hit, and Wellspring, and column 4, Adrenaline Junkie, Dragonfly, and Explosive Payload. So again, it's a little bit different. It's getting quite an older perk pool selection now. Obviously, this was prior to, or was it the same time Volt Shot came out? Or Volt Shot, I think.
Season after.
Yeah, so unfortunately there's no Volt Shot on Long Arm, which is kind of what I would naturally go towards. Volt Shot's a very powerful elemental perk regardless of what weapon you have it on. All of the weapon types have been normalized, so they all do the same damage multiplier. It's not like before where each weapon had different multipliers. It's all the same, but still a very potent weapon perk, but unfortunately we don't see that here. So a little bit of a more classic perk pool, but you know, it's our arc option here. I do see Dragonflies also in column 4. Redirection, if you can try make that work, yeah, but it's a bit of a finicky one. But yeah, I think the choice here, at least for me, would be something like Rapid Hit and something like Adrenaline Junkie or Explosive Payload. But again, the Prophet and Long Arm, they're not craftable. Your Time Worn Wayfarer is. That's our first craftable version, which will obviously be much easier to obtain right now because you can just plow through a bunch of the seasonal content and get those red boxes for Time Worn. Yeah, I think all three of us were very excited to go and use these weapons. I should also point out this will also apply to Dead Man's Tale. We haven't explicitly mentioned that in this episode, but I do recall them saying that on the live stream. I believe that DMT will be affected by this buff in PvE. This is all just PvE, no changes in PvP.
I didn't realize it was getting DMT too.
I believe so, yep. I think that was mentioned in the live stream.
Now,
I can't remember when that refresh came back, if that gets anything. I know it gets Vorpal.
I was going to say, and doesn't Dead Man's Tale...
Shoot to loot and rapid hit. Okay.
Doesn't Dead Man's Tale have access to a slightly higher fire rate because of the nature of the weapon? Right?
Yeah, but because it's still, I believe it's based on, well, really, these weapons are based on the frame of Dead Man's Tale. But from previous like frame buffs, they'll also still apply to the nearest exotic frame, if you get what I'm saying here. They'll get that damage buff as well. I might be misremembering here, but I'm sure DMT was mentioned, and if not, then we'll obviously correct that. But yeah, DMT is craftable if you want to go through some Seraph shields. No, sorry, not Seraph shields.
Presage?
Presage, yes, thank you.
Yeah, I just so happen to be... Dead Man's Tale has just been worked and reworked and worked and reworked, and I forget how it goes over time, but yeah, when you get that increased RPM when you're firing from the hip. It goes to a 150 instead of 120, right? And if you look at the damage profile on that now, I think after it gets a buff, I think that there is a chance that it becomes a moderately popular unstopped weapon. It's unstopped scout this season. Yeah.
Yep.
I've just been using rocket sidearm so much that I forget about that a little bit, to be completely honest with you. But if my mental math is coming together here, you get 150 RPM rate of fire from the hip. You get a little kinetic, damage bonus there from the fact that it's still it's a kinetic weapon that's still working against, most of your enemies. Tag on, Vorpal's still on there, right, Impetus? For your champ stunning, at least, I don't know how much.
Yes,
that's
it
really
is.
doing,
Yep,
but
still
yeah.
there. Yep.
I'm probably going for some more reload or ammo trade or something like that. But still, I don't know. Maybe DMT starts popping its head back up in some GMs and Nightfalls and such.
Just as a reminder, you can craft it with Outlaw or 4 times the Charm, Compulsive Reloader, Killing Wind, Moving Target, Vorpal, Rapid Hit, or Shoot to Loot. That are your kind of quote main perks. And then obviously you've got your typical barrel, your magazine with high cal rounds, armor piercing, ricochet, and your stock, which is a very rare thing that we get to craft in Destiny.
And so
DMT
keen on
also,
Outlaw. Well, go ahead.
I was going to say DMT just recently got some buffs of its own at the start of this annual expansion for the final shape. So you get at ×5 cranial spike, you get a 28% increased damage while hip firing. So if you can really sustain it, then DMT can be a very tearaway, it absolutely snowballs into quite a monster if you can keep that sustained, something like Vorpal weapon.
Yeah, I was just going to say
there you have it.
That I think I prefer Outlaw and Subsistence over Rapid Hit on scouts like this, because Rapid Hit just falls off too quickly. It's 2.5 seconds or something. It's really not a massive duration. And when you can reload quick enough, it's fine. But these suffer from that issue where you really need that 6-second timer from Outlaw, because you can't. Sometimes I feel like I'd run into this issue where I'm reloading and then I run out of Rapid Hit before I even load. I only get a half or 2/3 of the magazine done before I can finish off that reload, versus Outlaw that lasts for so long.
Yeah, I think that's just because of the unique reload animation that DMT has, where it's that 2 bullets at a time here. Because I've certainly noticed, what did I notice it on? Oh, the Mahis that I had was rapid hit. And if I timed it just right, I could get the maximum benefit of rapid hit at the start of the reload, and that would persist through the rest of the animation, even if the buff fell off. there's like a weird grace window there. But that's because I'm reloading the entire magazine all at once. Whereas on DMT or some of those other ones where it's a one at a time situation, you might get 2 or 4 or 6 bullets loaded really quickly, and then it will suddenly fall off, and it'll take a lot longer to reload as the aggressive frames take a bit sometimes without any help. So yeah, that's a good shout out, Saint. All right, are we good to move on to our playlist weapons here? Any final thoughts? Go get those aggressive frames. I know we talked about a Trials weapon and a Dungeon weapon, but Time Worn Wayfarer, absolutely get that in your sights. Go get that. It looks great, and it now will feel great by the time you're hearing this episode here. But yes, let's talk about our playlist weapons. There's actually a lot. We were kind of struggling what to talk about specifically for this, so we decided to break them up into 2 parts here. We're not going to be giving our full breakdown for everything. We will be truncating a few breakdowns. And again, because this is also coinciding with the release of the final shape, a lot of our existing playlist weapons did get a very small perk refresh, and we do want to talk about some of those refreshes where it matters. So case in point here, we will be touching on Wild Style, which is our solar double fire GL that did get a very significant perk refresh. We'll also be talking about 2 other Nightfall weapons here, Astyanax IV, our solar precision frame bow, and Warden's Law, which is our kinetic heavy burst hand cannon. Additionally, we'll be touching very shortly on Iron Banner's The Guiding Sight, which is the Strand high-impact scout rifle. And then we will be doing truncated reviews of our actually new weapons here, which on the Vanguard side, we have Origin Story, a kinetic precision auto that we'll be comparing to Breakneck, which is the Gambit kinetic precision auto from last season. And then on the Nightfall side, Shadow Price, the Arc precision auto frame rifle. And then Iron Banner's Claws of the Wolf, the Void rapid fire pulse. Our full breakdown here for the episode, we've got 3 on the docket. Crucible's Better Devils, which is the Strand adaptive frame hand cannon. Gambit's Hush, which is the solar precision frame bow. And the Nightfall Scintillation, which is the Strand adaptive burst LFR. That has since come and gone. It will return in the Nightfall rotation, but some of you maybe already have an adept version of that. We will not be doing a breakdown of the Perfect Pitch, which is the ritual solar SMG of this episode, but next week we will cover the Riposte, Aisha's Care, Shire's Wrath, and then the new hits Aberrant Action, Corrasion, and Perfect Paradox, just so y'all have an idea of what we're working with for these 2 episodes here. All right, let's jump into our Vanguard/Nightfall weapons here. I'll pass you over to Court to touch on the new Zero to Hero Wild Style.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to really quickly highlight, we do have origin traits for these weapons. And the way we've split this episode up is we've split it by origin traits, just so it's a little bit more cleaner to follow. So there'll be some weapons that are kind of mixed in with truncated versus fully expanded breakdowns, but we're going by Vanguard, then Gambit, Crucible, and then finishing things with the Iron Banner weapons. Real quickly, obviously these Vanguard, or Nightfall weapons I should say, are they have the Vanguard's Vindication and your Stunning Recovery. We've mentioned them before. We don't need to cover them, the technical notes for those origin traits. Stunning Recovery, obviously, just a really quick reminder that the stun activator can be from the weapon, another weapon then swapped to this one, or via an elemental effect while this weapon is equipped. So a big one there would be something like Jolt. Jolt's a very easy thing to apply externally from the weapon and then reapply while the weapon's equipped. And obviously you get that magazine refill from reserves. You get some HP restored plus 40 recovery for a few seconds. So yeah, Wild Style we have here. That is our from Zero to Hero solar double fire special grenade launcher. A reminder for special grenade launcher for double fires: it fires 2 projectiles at a slight offset from the reticle at the cost of 1 ammo. The changes that they've made here: in column 3, they've removed Keep Away and Unrelenting, and they've added in their place Reconstruction and Grave Robber. Column 4, they have removed Permeability and Attrition Orbs, and they've added in Vorpal Weapon and Bait and Switch. So yeah, it's went from I think we were quite critical on it way back when we covered this a few weeks ago, but they've made a quick turnaround on this. And we aren't doing a complete full breakdown here, but the recommended refreshed highlighted perks here in column 3, Envious Assassin or Reconstruction, and in column 4, Vorpal Weapon and Bait and Switch. So yeah, we weren't very positive for Wildstyle's initial perk selection, but Bungie have went in and supercharged this grenade launcher. The ammo and damage perks makes this a very, just a superb workhorse option, just to take into any type of content, just a clear house, to use it against champions, maybe even some boss action as well. If you want to try and kind of maximize as much damage, you're not getting a lot of ammo, you can pull this out and try and get that bait and switch or Vorpal Weapon to proc here. Saint, you got any kind of further thoughts for Wildstyle? You glad it's got a nice little glow up?
Yeah, double fires are such a cool archetype. They're, just at their base do strong damage for per shot basis and all of that stuff. It's always been okay, and to see some of the weaker traits removed and some more juiced options getting added in, especially I think Reconstruction and Vorpal Weapon, people will be very keen on. I'd also give a shout out. Well, text balance stock is really nice. Landing hipfire, 4 hipfire hits within 4 seconds, which I think is just two bullets or hitting multiple targets. It's going to give you 20 to range handling and reload, plus a 0.9, your 10% reload scaler, and then a few accuracy things, but that's not super key here. The thing that I would consider pairing that with is Stats for All. Stats for All is also giving 35 reload speed. So if you are kind of getting everything to come together just right with text balance stock and Stats for All, you can get a absolutely massive plus 55 reload speed buff with hitting just one group of shots into a dense pack of enemies. And yeah, I think bait and switch if I'm going to go envious, because I can capitalize that all the time. But I think One for All and Incandescent would be okay options. Getting onto that same thing of, if I'm going to be trying to spam shots, then maybe that One for All, the sofa combo there would be okay. Incandescent, it's just a lot of crowd control, not necessarily the damage that you'd be able to get out with Vorpal Weapon, especially with Reconstruction Vorpal Weapon, getting that into a damage rotation. I'm sure some people are keen on. Yeah, really happy to see this thing get just a little shot in the arm, just some juice to make sure that it makes its way into people's loadouts, because it's a cool weapon archetype, and we have 2 of them in the game now, including this one, and Wilderflight from the dungeon. I think are the only 2,
Wilderflight.
Right? Yeah.
Wilderflight and Wildstyle, very similar naming schemes here, a solar and a void one.
Yeah, so really happy to get it. See it get some juice being in such a limited archetype, and hopefully we see more of that. Maybe we'll see a kinetic option, or maybe next episode we'll see a void option make its way downtown. I'm here for it. Impetus, any closing thoughts here on Wildstyle?
I've gotten very lucky. I focused one regular one of these when I had a few spare Vanguard Engrams, and I did get the Reconstruction Vorpal Weapon, and it is phenomenal to fire back-to-back a total of 4 shots into a mini-boss target there. It's really strong. I've been using it in Breach Executable a lot, but I imagine it will be a staple of my inventory for dungeons and raids as well. I just haven't taken it into one of those yet.
It's here.
All right.
It's viable.
Yeah. It's viable at long last. I will cover, I don't know if this is going to be viable necessarily, but I'll cover our next weapon here. Astyanax IV did get a small perk refresh here. In column 3, we lost Perpetual Motion, Perfect Float, Enlightened Action, and Rangefinder, and then we added Attrition Orbs, To the Pain, Cornered, and Opening Shot, which had originally appeared in column 4 but got moved over to column 3. In column 4, Opening Shot technically removed, but then added back. But Collective Action has been removed. And in column 4, they've also added Surrounded. And then our new, or reprised, I should say, Archer's Gambit has returned. So overall, Not a huge shakeup here. I know Archer's Gambit has certainly made the rounds here on Hush, of course, the bow that it debuted on, also our Gambit weapon of focus here. And yes, on Pre-Astyanax, you can run the double Archer's combo of Archer's Tempo and Archer's Gambit here for a lot of draw speed bonuses, kind of up your DPS if you want to think about that on a primary bow here. Not hugely game breaking, I'll be totally honest, but yes, the animation speed is quite fast and you can put out a lot of arrows in a short amount of time here. Does that bring in some more benefits compared to something like Explosive Head in column 4 or Incandescent, for example? I would say no. I think Explosive Head is hugely beneficial on bows, especially when we have a champion mod for bows in a given episode now. You can stun champions a little bit faster because of the extra damage tech that comes with Explosive Head. And it is faster than this sped up draw speed bonus that Archer's Gambit gives you, right? You're still having to fire a full arrow for Archer's Gambit to stun a champion faster in our hypothetical scenario than when Explosive Head requires you to fire a singular arrow that is doing 2 separate ticks of damage all at once. So yes, Explosive Head will be better on a utility front for stunning champions. Outside of that, though, yes, can Archer's Gambit be a ton of fun in PvE? Sure, I will not deny you that. However, I'm not sure it competes with some of the other classics in the bow front here. Surrounded on a bow, I mean, yeah, go buck wild. You know, just have fun. Get real up close to those thralls, and man, I hope your draw time is low, because you might be doing a lot of damage. I mean, bows are already fairly strong. I haven't really thought about Surrounded as a necessity for minor enemies. Even in harder content, I feel like I can deal enough damage to them either with just Explosive Head or the base arrow necessarily, especially if it matches the elemental surge that might be active in the activity. So Surrounded, I'm really... It feels like a stretch to find a situation where that is the play, other than I just want to have fun with a silly perk on an Adept bow, dropping from Nightfalls here. Again, you've got the wildcard trait on there, so if you wanted to have a blast, run up to an enemy, proc Surrounded, kill them, they explode into wildcard, all the remaining enemies that you use to proc Surrounded, maybe run over those wildcard bolts, and then, you know, that procs and you've got explosions going off. Sure, I could see where that might be enjoyable to play with, but is it practical? I'm having a hard time. I'm having a really hard time here. But if you want that for the fun roll, more power to you, honestly. I won't fight you on that. Court, you got anything else on Pre-Astyanax that stands out from the changes that you feel like needs to be brought to everyone's attention?
No, you've pretty much covered my thoughts.
All right. Saint, anything you want to add?
Wildcard is so goofy. It's just a really silly origin trait, and I enjoy it for that. Wildcard bolts, I will add in, you can activate other traits on the weapon, like Incandescent and Shoot to Loot. Is that super in-game viable? Probably not. Is it kind of funny and fun to use? For sure. To see something walk over the bolt and die and then have an incandescent explosion, really enjoyable to watch happen in front of you. How often that can happen? Probably not enough to justify it, but always funny to see it when it does.
I will quickly say that just looking at Mossy's damage scaling spreadsheet, bows have one of the highest primary damage multipliers, which, as we've mentioned before in previous episodes, that the Telesto bolts from Wildcard are affected by. So if you can spawn those bolts and enemies go over them, you watch them explode, they are going to do pretty serious damage.
Okay, so maybe the Telesto bolt incandescent chain dream is alive here. That's what I'm hearing right now. I think that the last thing I'll say that's strange about this is when I saw Surrounded, I was odd on a weapon that has such a ridiculously long effective range. And then I thought, oh, well, Cornered will probably pair really nicely with that because it should get your draw time way down. It's like half as effective as Archer's Tempo. Archer's Tempo is like a 30% decrease. Cornered is like, what is that? Or 25% to 15%. What? I don't know. I feel like there should be more on bows. If I'm cornered with a bow and I have Surrounded up, I feel like I should be getting pretty significantly rewarded for using a bow within 15 meters of multiple targets. Just small feedback.
Saint wants to roleplay as Legolas on when he's using his bow in close proximity of many enemies.
Again,
I'm not saying
more
no.
power to you, just not my fire team.
Saint, you're right. All right. Next up, I'll take, because I know, Saint, you've got a little kind of comment about our next weapon, origin story. So I'll take Warden's Law, very apt for the hunter. Warden's Law, not much to talk about. There's just a very small amount of changes here. This is obviously our kinetic heavy burst hand cannon. Fires 2-round burst, and it grants a small flinch resistance while aiming down sights. In column 3, they removed snapshot sights and Discord and added in to the pain and demo. Column 4, they swapped out shot swap with adrenaline junkie. And nothing's really changed, because in column 3, we're still going to be highlighting Fourth Time's the Charm demo as one of the new ones. Perpetual Motion, Enlightened Action, and column 4 we've got Vorpal, Frenzy, and Adrenaline Junkie. So Demo and AJ are making an appearance here because they are just quite good perks to begin with. But yeah, as per our last recommendation, Lucky Pant Hunters still going to be going after that sought after 4 times the charm plus Vorpal roll. As a reminder, if you haven't realized this, or if you're still reading some of those posts that I've kind of been a little bit misinformed, the kinetic damage bonus was removed for bosses only, but not for other combatant types. So against mini bosses and champions, you're still getting that kinetic damage bonus that Warden's Law intrinsically has. Against bosses, that was removed, but everything else is still fair game. For non-Lucky Pant usage, there are now fewer junk perks than before, taking up slots, and some great perks just for utility and general purposes. So, as I mentioned, Demo plus AJ, just a nice pairing overall, as does Perpetual Motion, Enlightened Action plus Frenzy or Vorpal. Just I use the phrase workhorse weapon for a lot of weapons that we talk about, but this truly is a workhorse weapon. Just outside of the kind of outlier of Lucky Pants Hunters, I think heavy bursts just do a really good job. If we do have kind of like a anti-barrier hand cannon in the future, this is just a very good weapon to bring in. Or if you're just using Radiant for anti-barrier purposes. And currently, it is a overload perk for hand cannons. So a lot more kind of ease of use against overloads. But I'm still going to be using other things outside of like weapon usage for overloads. I do like to jolt my overload minotaurs before they get close to me. But yeah,
man of culture.
Yes. Yeah, Warden's Law is still a solid weapon, and there's now fewer perks that will get in your way to get those sought after perks. If you can only get a Demo plus AJ roll when you're doing your Nightfalls, that's fine. Very solid pairing. Impetus, you got any other comments here?
Nope, I am chasing that exact role. I did not get it when it first debuted because I hadn't played a ton on Hunter, but now I do want to play with that Lucky Pants style here. So I will be chasing down that 4 times the charm Vorpal roll.
Yeah.
All right, Saint.
I would just say another weapon archetype that went, a whole type of weapon that went from 0 to hero and gets ton play now. Another great example of long forgotten come back to the spotlight. All right, next up we got Origin Story. Origin Story is a kinetic precision auto rifle. Given that minus 20% horizontal recoil, this weapon has your Vanguard's Vindication for 10 HP on kill, and then also Nadir Focus, which is that increased range and decreased accuracy cone size of about 2 range and 1.5% accuracy cone at each stack that you get. You look at this weapon, and it's not going to be great when it compares to its most recent competitor, and that is Breakneck. Honestly, a lot of people, I think, on initial thought would see all the lower stats. You get 29 meters before damage fall off versus 30 meters. Your handling is like your one better thing of 52 versus 37, so that's going to give you about 0.04 seconds difference in your like ready stow ADS speeds. The reload is also slower, 1.96 seconds versus 1.87 seconds. The recoil direction is also 7 points lower. The thing that I think is going to allow this to compete, though, is that, first of all, it has the traits that it would need to be, viable, even in a archetype that's kind of middle of the road. Precision auto rifles are fine. They're not quite as strong as your rapid fires or your adaptives, and especially our no hesitation that just came out is really strong. There are a couple things here, though. In our final column, we've got onslaught. We have got kinetic tremors. And in our, third slot, there is demo if you want some utility, keep away, feeding frenzy. So it's doing okay. The thing that I think is going to set this apart for people that didn't like breakneck is the recoil pattern, which, yes, the recoil direction may be 7 points lower, but using this, I play mostly on controller on PC, and my experience was that the base like screen shake and recoil pattern of Origin Stories is a little bit easier to control than breakneck. And I'm sure there's going to be some people out there that thought that was just a little too unwieldy or didn't like that for whatever reason. And if that is you, but you still want a kinetic onslaught or a kinetic tremors auto rifle, then hey, Origin Stories here. You can go in there. You don't even have to play Gambit. You can go by strikes instead, which may also be a win depending on who you talk to in the community. But yeah, it's pretty solid. There's also some other things like a Zen moment and dynamic sway reduction, which by all means are not traits for PvE. Yet when you're capitalizing on something like onslaught, I think that there are people that may gravitate towards something like that because of the desire to hit crits so often. Dynamic sway reduction, you're just holding down that trigger, and the same could be said for onslaught. Things like feeding frenzy, keep away, pair more naturally, but an option is there. And yeah, if you wanted a kinetic tremors or onslaught, especially onslaught, the way that RPM goes up, it's like a 37% decrease in the firing delay, which is equates to about a 60% outgoing damage per second increase, which is really high. Again, kind of taking a middle of the road archetype and really pumping it up. Stuff like that can help with hitting crits, and crits is damage. And something else there to note is the reload speed that you're getting from onslaught. Don't forget that at you're getting 15, 25, or 35 reload speed. So you pair that with something like a flared magwell or whatever it may be, and you can already be up to a 90 reload stat, which is getting your reload down to like 1.3 seconds or something like that. So it's pretty solid. Alloy mag IMO is also a great option here for a weapon that you're going to be dumping out your reserves on so often. That could get you all the way down to like a 1.15 second reload. So maybe not a super attractive weapon on first look, but there's something there, and worth a try if you're still looking for more onslaught weapons for your arsenal. All right, we got another auto rifle up next. This is a Nightfall weapon though. Impetus, what do we got up next?
We've got Shadow Price, one of our first ever Vanguard Nightfall adept weapons to debut all the way back in Season of the Chosen. It was fine on release. It's a precision frame arc auto rifle. So decently fine stats. Again, same intrinsic bonus as Origin Story, that minus 20% recoil yaw. So the reduced horizontal recoil, meaning it feels fairly nice to shoot. But yeah, it wasn't a hugely impressive weapon when it debuted, and I think we've been hoping that when it did eventually come back, it would get a bit of a buff. And it has. It is definitely a better weapon than when it first debuted. Unfortunately, there are other ARC auto rifles that have come out since then, and I think that's where the sharp competition will come in here, unfortunately. But we can talk about Shadow Price first here. Let's get into the perks, because on the stat side of things, it is definitely top of the line here. It's got top of the line range, very, very solid at about almost 30 meters ADS here. decently solid handling and reload speed, and we do have some excellent perks that can help out with both of those, like Stats for All. Overflow especially gives you a larger magazine, but also does auto reload whenever you run over a heavier special brick as a primary weapon, which can be very solid as well. And then we have decent damage perks. One for All, we do have Volt Shot at long last. Not a lot of people were hoping for that. And then we've also got Surrounded added onto it, so that can be very nice for our up close and personal damage. However, since Shadow Price went and then has returned, we've also got the Prosecutor, which made its debut last season. Also an Arc Precision frame, dropping from the first encounter of the Prophecy dungeon here. That certainly has a flashier perk pool. Again, the stats are not quite as impressive. Shadow Price does edge it out by a little bit here in most of the leading categories that I've mentioned. But you do have things like Keep Away in Column 3, as well as Rewind rounds, Dragonfly. Very, very exciting whenever Dragonfly shows up in Column 3. That can be a bit of a flashy, fun roll there, especially when you pair it with things like Frenzy in Column 4, or Golden Tricorn, or Volt Shot in Column 4. It's also worth pointing out that Prophecy weapons have the Crossing Over origin trait, which is a very spicy origin trait. You get increased range and handling for the top half, which then pivots down to extra damage in the bottom half of the magazine. A lot of stuff going on there versus Shadow Price's more standard Vanguard's Vindication and Stunning Recovery. Again, Stunning Recovery is still a very solid origin trait, but that only works against champions, whereas Crossing Over is just, it works in everything there. So where do we ultimately land here? I think if you are somebody that wants to go and farm that first encounter of Prophecy, it's certainly not a difficult activity to farm. Very fast encounter once you get the hang of it. You've got access to Prosecutor. Prosecutor does feel really good to fire. I know we were talking about that originally when we covered Prosecutor for the first time. It feels really solid for having a recoil direction of just 69, but that deterministic recoil is doing a lot of favors. Shadow Price, I fired just a little bit here. Again, I'm playing on M&K, so the deterministic recoil isn't a big factor. Cord, I don't know, have you fired a Shadow Price? Do you know how it feels on a controller? Saint?
Yeah, I'm still going Prosecutor, to be honest with you.
You're still going Prosecutor?
Yeah,
okay.
And it's fine. The Volt Shot in there is fine. But I don't know. I just kind of like Prosecutor. I will say that I did get lucky on that, and that I've got Keep Away, Volt Shot, and Dragonfly Frenzy. And between those two roles, if I'm looking for an Arc Auto Rifle, those two options are both quite strong. And just, yeah, Shadow Price, tough to compete with that. And the origin trait is so strong, like you said, and despite the fact that its recoil direction is seemingly kind of low, and the Shadow Price is a full 10 points on it, I don't think it feels that much better.
Court, do you have any additional thoughts to add?
No, I was looking at the other frames here. So Dark Deciders are kind of a little bit classic Iron Banner weapon. You can focus for it, and then you've also got Sweet Sorrow. Both of those rapid fire frames, really, if you prefer rapid fire frames like me, then I would opt to go for one of those. Dark Decider obviously gets Volt Shot. Sweet Sorrow was well before Volt Shot existed, but it's still a very great weapon. It's got one of the best origin traits out there. Not necessarily easy to get, mind you, because it is attached to Vox Obscura. It's part of that weapon set. It is craftable, but pretty hard to try and obtain if you haven't previously played Witch Queen / season 16 through 19. Shadow Price, I think, is a great introduction to Arc auto rifles, but if you can try and get into the first Prophecy dungeon encounter, then get that Prosecutor. It's our only dungeon with the enhanceable perks at the moment, at the time of recording anyway. Shadow Price obviously gets enhanceable perks as well, but I'm certainly pivoting towards Prosecutor if I wanted a Arc Precision roll.
Man, Land Tank, what one hell of an origin trait on Sweet Sorrow and that whole weapon set. Absolutely beautiful.
Very much the peaked in high school of origin traits.
Maybe that was maybe we went too far here.
Yeah,
moment.
let's just scale that back a bit.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Again, not to say that Shadow Price is terrible by any means. It is a perfectly fine arc auto rifle. It's got stats for all, one for all. We have shouted that wombo combo of a perk combination for many, many episodes. We'll continue to say that. It's going to make any weapon feel great and deal good damage. However, as far as the frame goes, as far as auto rifles go, as far as arc auto rifle goes, Shadow Price isn't that unique in what it brings to the table other than a fine stat package and a really solid perk combination. Prosecutor has that plus a more interesting origin trait, and then if we start branching out beyond the archetypes, you've got some really solid rapid fires as well. So go for this if you're a fan of Shadow Price. If you're just looking for a really solid arc auto rifle, there's a good chance you've already got one in your vault and you already have your mind made up on the situation, I think is where the rest of us would land on that. Let's move on to something that's a little bit more unique here. Scintillation. Court, are you taking this one or is Saint taking this one?
I'll take this.
Okay.
So this is our Strand Adaptive Linear Fusion Rifle, and as a reminder, LFR adaptives are those that fire a 3-round burst at the expense of 1 ammo. It does have another origin trait here that is Viced Stinger. We've mentioned that last episode, but as a reminder, hits have a chance to activate Viced Stinger for 7 seconds, which grants the following. It refills 25% of your magazine from reserves, and it decreases the ADS movement speed penalty by 10%, aka that's just faster strafing while aiming down sights. And the chance is based on weapon type, and it's 10% for LFRs, and that's 4-second cooldown between activations. Mentioned this last episode that Viced Stinger used to be a very hot perk, much like Land Tank, but it's no longer. It's still viable, it's still useful, but it's just not as hot. So we're going to be pairing this with our other competitors of Doom Petitioner, which is from Season 23, and Briar's Contempt, which is from Root of Nightmares. So range of 48, that's 3 down. Stability of 45, 2 down. Handling 33 plus 2. Reload of 28, that's plus 3. Recoil direction of 76 plus 2. Zoom of 26 plus 1. Other notable stats here, so it's tied with Briars for highest base reserves at 20, and others are at 19. So mentioned this earlier in the episode, the higher base reserve stat you have, the more ammunition you're going to be picking up from ammo bricks. So the damage fall off for LFR starts at around 1,500 meters. It's not a typo, that's 1,500 meters. So wouldn't be too worried about all that range stat. You don't need to build into it. Overall, it's very solid stats versus its competing options here. High zoom and a solid recoil direction in combination with recent changes to this archetype's firing pattern make it for a very easy to control weapon. Saint, how does this feel on controller?
I've been running around using, I got a reservoir burst roll, which we'll talk about pros and cons of that in a moment, but it's fun to use. It's easy to use. Yeah. It's solid, man.
Yeah, it feels really good on mouse and keyboard as well. Just it fits like a glove, really. So over on our highlighted weapon perks here, so column 1 and 2 for barrels, arrowhead break as usual, plus 10 handling, and that does maximize your recoil direction. And on the mag side, we've got enhanced battery for that plus 1, or you can go accelerated coils for that 6% higher DPS at the cost of 2% total damage. Columns 3 and 4. Quite a nice selection here. Envious Assassin or Rewind Rounds, that's your kind of ammo-based perks. You could throw in auto-loading holster if this is something that you're swapping to and then swapping away. You'd obviously want to build into that. You want to build into handling. It does have quite a kind of less than middling handling speed, but you can boost that up if you're pretty lucky with the barrel perks here, and then pairing that with something like a quick access sling in your weapon mod. Column 4, though, we've got some really solid perks. We've got Bait and Switch. We've got Firing Line. Nice to see that. We've also got Reservoir Burst, which is very interesting to see on an LFR. As a reminder, so while magazine is at or above maximum capacity, so, take that in mind with Envious Assassin. If you can overcharge the magazine stat, you will have Reservoir Burst until you reach your the 100% -1 basically is how to describe that. So you can have like, what is it, 3 or 4 extra kind of reservoir burst shots here. So you get 25% increased damage and causes enemies to explode, dealing a kind of the base number here is 444, which is actually quite substantially high for an explosive pair. It doesn't sound high, but this is just base stat. It will get enhanced. It will get multiplied by all the other kind of different multipliers in the game on top of that. It does also passively grant 30 magazine size stat. That does kind of mess around with magazine stuff. It's a little bit too complicated to get into this episode. I, of course, defer to Mossy Maxie's fantastic ammo reserve spreadsheet, which will be getting changed anyway with the new changes to reserves.
Wow.
I know, but definitely go support him. Very fantastic spreadsheet. Very fantastic science person. But yeah, folks do kind of forget that Reservoir Burst does tweak with your magazine size stat, which is identical to Extended Mag. And yeah, we've got Fire and Line, which is your, if you're near 2 allies within 50 meters, you get 20% increased precision damage. And obviously Bait and Switch here, which, it used to be 35%, it's now 30 as of a few patches ago. But still, like, very easy to do. Another kind of classic, if you want to combine that with auto-loading holster, if you can't get an Envious or Rewind Rounds roll or Rapid Hit, then like it's still a very viable option to swap between all your weapons, swap to Scintillation. Then once you've expended all your ammo, swap away to like a sniper rifle and then wait for ALH to actually proc. Just as a kind of final reminder here in terms of miscellaneous and other recommendations. So Massive Work charge time is still a stat negation. We mentioned that last episode as well. Hopefully that'll get fixed in the future. And Backup Mag as a kind of weapon mod, at least in PvE. I think we didn't mention at the top of the episode, but the changes to mods that are happening, adept mods anyway, they're losing a lot of their, or all of their negative stats. That's kind of part 2 of, I think, part 3 of the weapon mod systems getting kind of an overhaul. So sometime in the future, we know they are adding more or expanding upon the weapon mod system. So hopefully not all of our weapon mod recommendations will just be Backup Mag. It'll be something else. And very solid weapon here. I've used this a fair amount. I want to use it a little bit more. You know, LFRs aren't the hot, spicy thing that they used to be, but it just feels fun to use this. And it's very shiny. This weapon is very shiny. You get a nice ornament or a shader on that, you can see little sparkling stars. It's like looking into like a galaxy kind of thing. It's very cool looking. Saint, what's your vibes? What's your thoughts with Scintillation here?
The standard version looks like something out of a Dreaming City, lab, and the adept version looks like it came from Green Bay, Wisconsin, and I'm not really sure what happened right there, but it is a good looking weapon. I do love the effects.
Shout out to the Cheeseheads.
One time,
we see you.
Reservoir Burst, I think I was attracted to Reservoir Burst plus Envious just because like nothing really has that, so it's fun. And LFRs, DPS not good, total damage it's good, and they have been getting just like we don't always speak super highly of them, but I feel like the sentiment around LFRs right now is like really low, when the reality is that their total damage is still good compared to other weapon archetypes, and it takes an outlier to beat the total damage output of a weapon like this with Firing Line or Bait and Switch with that 30% damage buff. And I don't know, they're easier than ever to use with all those changes that Court mentioned at the beginning. The way they change kind of the recoil and firing general pattern of all these weapons, it's easier than ever to hit all your crits and make sure you're getting that max damage. It's really just only viable when you have super long damage phases and other weapons that you don't want to be using there, which is not super often, but it's still fine.
Good GM weapon, though, and we take that. All right, that's a rarity around these parts. So we will always celebrate a real in-game weapon, even if the current meta does not allow for top-of-the-line DPS / total damage, which, again, total damage, Scintillation is doing just fine.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because I look at the weapon that we were just talking about, Shadow Price, and it's also fine as far as archetypes go, but it doesn't have the, like, the trait uniqueness that something like Scintillation does, and that's really what sets it apart from being able to go get a dungeon weapon that has shinier traits, even though if it's not like massively better, it's got cooler traits on it. So like I'm gonna go for that instead, and I would hope for that more, even if, to your point, even if it's not a meta weapon archetype, that's just gonna happen. That's just the nature of weapons being added to the game. Only so many of them can be meta, but it doesn't mean they can't be fun or have interesting trait combos like that to draw you out and make you use them a little bit more, even when it's not super serious content.
In terms of availability for adaptive bursts, this is probably our most available at the moment, because Doom Petitioner from last season isn't directly acquirable at the moment. It is, you can craft it, but unless you've got some spare Deep Sight Resonance, you've got some spare Doom Petitioners around, then it's pretty impossible to get outside of, say, Xur or Gunsmith, if it's even part of their loot pool. Briar's Contempt is obviously part of Root of Nightmares. If you're not an avid raider, then you're not going to try and get this. Fire Forget is probably our kind of next, because you can acquire it, but again, it's part of Seraph Shield, where it's with the other Seraph weapons, and so I think Storm Chasers are second to Scintillation in terms of acquirability, being from the Duality Dungeon. So quite a rare weapon set at the moment, even though we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weapons that are adaptive bursts. It's just so like 2, possibly 3 if you want to count Fire and Forget, that are currently acquirable, which a bit of a shame, because I much prefer adaptive bursts in terms of like usability. I've not spent too much time in terms of what's better in terms of damage potential. Is it adaptive, or is it just your standard single fire LFRs? But I feel the 3 burst has always been like my favorite out of the 2 frames.
I'm with you on that one.
Yep.
Definitely like the burst at the cost of a single bullet, if we want to call it that, a single shot in the mag, hugely beneficial. Let's move on to Gambit here. Let's try and get this one over with as quick as possible. We do have Hush coming back to us here. This was I can't remember what they called it back then. It was a fancy little fella, and it had Archer's Gambit as the special perk on Hush way back when. That was before I started playing Destiny 2. That's why I don't remember what we called it back then. But it is returned in all its glory. It is our Gambit weapon for this episode. It does come with the Gun and Run origin trait, which is unique to the Gambit weapons only. And it only has Gun and Run, which is also important here. So killing enemies within 3 seconds of each grants 6.25% increased sprint speed for 10 seconds. And that does remain active while the bow, in this case, is stowed. And it does stack with other sprint speed buffs up to that cap of 12.5%. And the activation is by the enemy rank, where rank and file gives you just over a third. Everything else gives you 100% activation. Solar Precision Frame Bow. That is Hush. And weirdly enough, we've got kind of a few of those in the game right now, including 2 from Vanguard / Nightfall, which is what we'll be comparing it with here. That's right. We've got Strident Whistle, which is dropping from playlists, and then Astyanax IV, which you've already mentioned a little bit earlier on, from the Nightfalls specifically here. So yeah, we've got 3 of these, all with origin traits. Astyanax and Hush both are enhanceable. Astyanax is the only one that gets an adept version, FYI here. In terms of like a comparison of stats as we kind of use them in practice here, on the handling, they have the same stow and ready speed across all 3, even though there is a 1 point difference between the 3 of them. It actually does translate to the same speed here. Reload does have the same reload speed. It's 0.4 seconds to reload across all three. Again, they all get Archer's tempo here, so that does become a much quicker reload speed with the right perks here. And let's be honest, you're here for the perk differences anyways. When it comes to bows, it's not really a big difference in the stats to be relevant. And on the perk side, it is kind of hard to differentiate. I think Strident Whistle definitely loses out to Pre-Astyanax and Hush, because it is the much older bow. It was the first solar precision of the three, and it also is not kind of on the same tier, I would say. So, for example, we don't have attrition orbs in column 3 or 4 on Strident Whistle, but it does show up in column 3 for Pre-Astyanax and Hush. So you've got that going for you. Again, Pre-Astyanax got refreshed, so it does also get Archer's Gambit in column 4. Strident Whistle was not around for Archer's Gambit. Hush does get Frenzy, which is the kind of the more unique aspect here. But when we think about bows, when we think about what's really relevant to how we use bows, they do start to get a little bit more uniform, right? We've got Archer's Tempo in column 3. We've got Explosive Head in column 4. That is shared by all three bows. Hush does not. Oh, it does. Sorry, I missed it. It does have Incandescent there. All three of them have Incandescent. We've got Successful Warm-Up on Pre-Astyanax and Hush. We've got Shoot to Loot in column 3 on Pre-Astyanax and Hush. Again, I'm really trying to look for things here that really make Hush stand out. And we do have Pugilist. We do have Swashbuckler if you want to lean into a melee build there. That is, I think, a very specific playstyle for PvE. I would dare say maybe something that's a little bit more fun if you're trying to lean into a specific melee build. I think, like, I can think of maybe a Caliban's Hand roll on Solar Hunters. That could be a lot of fun if you want to play with Swashbuckler a lot. Solar Titan can certainly make use of Swashbuckler. Again, just kind of strange cases here where there's a lot of overlap. And when it comes to a comparison of the origin traits, I got to give it to Pre-Astyanax. You've got 3 compared to the 1 of Hush, which is run and gun, or gun and run. And then we've got just Vanguard's Vindication on Strident Whistle. But other than that, it's kind of a pick your poison here. Do you like Gambit a lot? Go run Hush. Hush does have a lot of PvP potential here. Don't think I'm ignoring that side of things. I know a lot of PvP content creators that like to use bows have been chasing a Hush to get a hold of those enhanceable perks, and that has been a lot of fun. Has Pre-Astyanax come around in this episode's GM rotation yet, folks? I don't think it has, but correct me if I'm wrong, Court and Saint.
I don't believe so.
No.
Okay.
No.
Unless it was... No, because it wouldn't have been available. Maybe it was like the Nightfall weapon, like the first week of the release or something.
Right, so you could have gotten the regular version of it.
Yeah. You know, there's one thing that I will say, though. Talking about standing out versus Pre-Astyanax is tough, and there's not a ton there. But the 2 traits that I think Hush has that make it stand out to me are Hipfire Grip and Offhand Strike in combination with Archer's Gambit, which Pre-Astyanax does not have either of those traits, which, I mean, to me, Hipfire Grip is like the true partner of Archer's Gambit, right? And that's, you can get your draw time down to like 200 milliseconds or something like that. And kind of like you've just said, that is a very specific playstyle. Not everybody's gonna want to lean into that like hipfire, super low draw time bow thing. But if you do want to lean in on Archer's Gambit, I would say go hipfire grip with Archer's Gambit on Hush over Pre-Astyanax, because it just doesn't have anything that can really make activating Archer's Gambit easier.
Good shout. Court, you have anything to add?
I was looking at the schedule for the Nightfall. So Astyanax was the second week, so it'll probably be around about mid-August before next appears, because this episode we've got 8 weapons to go through, so quite a fair amount of kind of stuff that we haven't talked about. Uzumi and Undercurrent and the Slammer, they didn't get any tweaks, so we're not talking about them this week, but they will appear in the Nightfall selection. So yeah, mid-August, and then probably the week before the end of the episode. But in terms of the weapon, Hush, yeah, if you play a lot of Gambit, if you can get the 3 perks in column 3 and 4, and you can really luck out to get those perks that you're after, then fine. But yeah, I think the Nightfall Solar precision frame bow is the one that I would probably go for out of the three.
Yeah, I suppose if, again, I've noticed we got Unrelenting in Column 3 of Hush. That is unique out of our 3 bows here. And if you pair that with something like Incandescent and you can get multi-kills there, you could maybe get Unrelenting to proc a little bit quicker than you could on a standard bow that's not one of the other two, because Unrelenting doesn't show up on the other two. Mm-hmm. But again, that's a very specific perk on out of a very long list of things that can drop on Hush. So I wouldn't push people to just go play for an Unrelenting in Column 3 Solar Precision Frame Bow. I'd have to give you something a little bit stronger to go chase after before I do that. And I'm just not sure that Hush really brings a lot outside of those very niche playstyles that we've already talked about, which can be just as valid and just as fun. Again, not discounting that, but for general play here, go for any of the 3. Maybe not Strident Whistle as much. Go for Pre-Astyanax or go for Hush. Pre-Astyanax with the smaller perk pull and the Adept version. Hush for some newer combinations, some newer options that's also enhanceable, and you can also get more perks total than you can on an Adept Pre-Astyanax, granted that you have the enough Gambit resets. I think it's 3 or 4, but you can get a total of 6, right? 3 in column 3, 3 in column 4 with enough resets, and that could increase the odds of you getting a super god roll if you so choose. So bear that in mind. Make your choices, go have fun in whatever activity you want to go chase. But yes, Hush is back, and it's solid, but it's not quite as unique as I think some of us were hoping for. Definitely not as unique as fan favorite, or an oldie but a goodie that is returning here. Saint, what do we have for our Crucible weapon?
Starting off here, we got Better Devils. Better Devils to this day remains one of my highest kill count weapons in the Connect slot in the entire game. And it's partially because back then there weren't a ton of really strong options and explosive payload was really good and there didn't show up a lot on weapons like this, but we're not going to worry too much about that. Let's talk about the new version of Better Devils. Is it viable in today's day and age? All these years later, can it still hang on to a shred of relevancy here? As a Crucible weapon, it now has access to One Quiet Moment, which is a very newfangled, new world thing for Better Devils as the kind of old geezer of a weapon that it is. And it also has an Endear Focus. As a reminder, for One Quiet Moment, when you're out of combat, you will get that plus 20 handling, 40 reload, and a 5% reload duration multiplier decrease. Out of combat refers to having not dealt or received damage within the last 5 seconds. Kills reduce that to 1.5 seconds until damage is dealt or received. Better Devils is still an adaptive hand cannon, but it's no longer kinetic. It's now a strand hand cannon. The adaptives are just kind of well-rounded. They don't really have much of a frame bonus there. And then again, with Nadir Focus, you're getting +2 range and a 1.5% of decreased accuracy cone size stack up to 5 stacks. All right. We got another strand adaptive hand cannon out there, and Season of the Witch brought Kept Confidence. This is a much more PvP focused weapon though. So as we look through the stats, it's going to beat out Better Devils in most categories. Better Devils got 40 range, that's 6 under, about 8.8 meters. It's got 42 stability, which is 14 under. It's only got 40 handling, which is 5 under. Same reload speed of 40 and 88 for its recoil direction, which is 3 under. So on initial read, you're going to think, okay, low stats. Yeah, why am I interested in this thing? But hey, a playlist weapon here. It's got 12 traits in each column, and it has way more on the PvE front of value to offer than the traits of Kept Confidence. So don't write this thing off just yet. Looking at barrels and mags, I probably would take something like Small Bore for that +7 range of stability, and then on the mag side, your classics of like Attack Mag for an extra bullet in the mag, a little range, a 10 reload, or Ally for that 15% reload increase whenever the mag is empty, depending on what traits you decide to go for in columns 3 and 4. And we got quite a list of viable traits here. In column 3, we've got Rapid Hit, Enlightened Action, Slice, Demo, Pugilist, Perpetual Motion, Reconstruction, and even air trigger, which is not something words I ever thought would be coming out of my mouth, but Cool Guy has really been on a kick about this, so I decided to give it a moment of a chance, and maybe there is something there. To briefly recap on why anyone would use air trigger in PvE, basically if you hit a quick jump and go for a reload, it's giving you outlaw reload speeds for being in the air, and that means even just a normal little jump. I still find the loop of it kind of odd. It's just not something that I'm used to, but there's no doubt that it's a pretty free to activate high reload there. Keep in mind that a rapid hit is also going to be giving you up to 25 stability, and something like Enlighten Action is also going to be giving a lot of handling, to 50 handling and reload speed at 12 stacks, which on hand cannons translates to only 4 bullets, which these days you're running backup mag, you've got 13 rounds in your hand cannon, not too hard to activate that 4 stacks or 4 shots for 12 stacks of 50 handling and reload speed. Following it up in the 4th column, we've got One for All, Explosive Payload, Hatchling, Frenzy, Adrenaline Junkie, and Swashbuckler. No shortage of damage and utility traits here. I have a personal role that I'm looking for, but I'll hold on to that for just a second. Court, is this enough to bring you back to using one of the oldest weapons in this game? And if so, what role would you be looking for on it?
I thought you were going to go another way with that question. Is this enough to take me back into PvP? I mean, I've been playing a fair amount of PvP, and I did get a few Bitter Devils. No, I definitely can echo your sentiment about Bitter Devils. That was my go-to hand cannon back in the day, back in year 1 launch. It felt good. It still feels good. We talk about the technical recommendations of all these weapons, but at the end of the day, does this weapon feel good in your hands? And this one certainly does. Whereas, something like Kept Confidence, I used it a little bit and it just was like, it just doesn't feel great. Just something about it just didn't really, tickle me. So yeah, I think looking at the huge array of perks in both column 3 and 4, like if I can luck out and get something like Slice in column 3, Enlighten Action, even Demo or Pugilist, Rapid Hit, even Reconstruction, there's just some really good perks in here that if I can luck out and get, sure. And then in column 4, One for All's in there, Frenzy, I would love that as a pairing with either, Demo, Frenzy, or Slice Frenzy, just with that being a unique combo. Yeah, like a solid feeling weapon with some really great perks to boot. Impetus, you obviously didn't have the same experience with this being like the OG Destiny 2 weapon, but do you see anything here that you're kind of like, okay, I'll play a little bit of PvP, try to get some rolls?
Yeah, absolutely. I have actually unlocked this weapon, even though I have not stepped foot into PvP. I got it as a Crucible engram drop from Hawthorne. It was Demo AJ, which very serviceable. Again, I haven't fired that roll yet. I've got it sitting in my vault here. But when I do eventually make my way into PvP, I think I will probably... I mean, it's going to come down to... I always start with my damage perks. Probably Explosive Payload or Frenzy. Again, AJ's great here. I certainly am fine with the role that I have right now. But again, if I'm just chasing a role in particular, I feel like it will be Explosive Payload or Frenzy. And then working my way back to column 3, Reconstruction seems just the most simplistic one. Again, Frenzy is going to be helping me with my reload speed, so I might as well be getting extra bullets if I were to get a Reconstruction Frenzy roll, or if I were just to think of something to pair with Frenzy. I'd happily take Slice to Rapid Hit as well. Yeah, I think I'm fine with that. The Demo and the Pugilist, perfectly fine with that, but if I don't get them on any of the rolls, so be it. I can get Grenade Regeneration elsewhere. I think the extra bullets part is where it will really shine for me if I can get that. Let's see, it's got about 10 or 11 in the mag. Yeah, if I could get 22 or 20 bullets in the magazine, that will feel really nice with either Frenzy or Explosive Payload to help with champion stunning or just general slaying out. So Yeah, definitely something I will, if it gets to drop, sweet. I don't know if I'll be spending Crucible engrams on it necessarily, but if it lands, I'll be really happy. If not, yeah, I'll be okay, I guess. I haven't used a lot of strand hand cannons in PvE. That's the thing. I love Kept Confidence for PvP. The 120 strand hand cannon, whose name I'm forgetting, from Neptune, from Neomuna. I have a lot of PvP kills on that. So I just haven't even thought about using a strand one for PvE, but now we have a really great option. Definitely a ton of reasons to go and get Better Devils. If you like having hand cannons, solid PvE hand cannons in every element, this will certainly be the one for the foreseeable future. I would have to imagine the bar's got to be pretty high for a potential heavy burst strand hand cannon or a 180 hand cannon to match and surpass Better Devils, because you got all the juiced perks on one gun, and you can certainly get a lot of those on the same roll if you do enough Crucible resets. So,
Round Robin was the other hand cannon, the aggressive one. Yeah, I totally echo that. I am kind of fondly waiting for a 180 strand cannon, as we're calling it. Like Better Devils feels really good, but I still gravitate towards 180s. I'm still using Posterity now, and of course it's in a different slot to these weapons that we're talking about, but it just feels so good. And hand cannons just always feel really great in Destiny. They really put a lot of effort into making these specific guns, these basically hand guns that are now amplified by 3. In size and in power, but they are such a great weapon to take into any type of content. But that 180 strand cannon would be, whenever that may be.
Yeah, until then I'm going for Slice and Frenzy, because of the way that Slice will allow you can use Thread of Isolation to generate a lot of tangles, but being a strand weapon as well with Threaded Blast, one of the roles on this I was testing out this past week, I believe was, I don't know. I went through 5 of them, and then sometimes the brain just starts to loop it all into one big memory. But I believe I was using Slice a lot, and then getting those enemies severed and having them spawn a tangle, and then you can just hit that tangle real quick and detonate for a massive, AoE explosion. That's more isolated to this episode, but I would still say there's a lot of utility on something like Slice Explosive Payload, just for getting targets stunned, because like Overload and Explosive Payload stuff like Impetus, I think was talking about just a second ago, and then Slice on just how valuable that is to be using on a champion you're about to stun. If you don't quite kill them right before they come out of the stun and they get a shot off, well, it doesn't matter, because they're doing like 40% reduced damage because they're severed. And then probably like Enlighten Action 1 for all or something like that, just to have a really high damage output version. But I don't know. I've been racking up a lot of Crucible engrams playing Iron Banner and getting all those pinnacles. The engrams have been stacking up at Shack, so I'll have to cash some of those out pretty soon and see what we can land.
Yeah, it's a good thing that you mentioned Sever there, because as a reminder, that's 40% for 10 seconds, or 15 seconds if you've got the strand-specific extension fragment. And against overloads, that's kind of where you want it to be, especially this episode where we have that as a champion effect. And then disruption itself also applies, I think it's 25%. DR against the enemy. So, we're already talking, I can't work that percentage decrease in my head, but it's something like 55%, maybe closer to 60% damage reduction on an overload champion, which is what you need, because, overloads like to start teleporting everywhere and launch their bullshit weapons towards you and your fire team. So if you can get there, basically split their damage in half with Slice and then with the overload actual effect, then you're cooking. So Better Devils with Slice would be a really great option. All right, Better Devils, good one.
Yeah.
All right, we're heading over to Iron Banner for our last 2 weapons. Kind of going to, not as long in terms of the last few kind of major breakdowns. So first up, we've got the Guiding Sight, which got a quick refresh with quite like we don't tend to see this. We saw a revamp to Column 2 where it went from armor piercing, high cal, and ricochet rounds, and they swapped them out with accurized rounds, tactical mag, and steady rounds. So strange to see that. Yeah. Column 3, they removed tunnel vision and got shot straight, and they added into the pain and slice. And in column 4, they removed Encore and added in Strategist in its place. So yeah, this is our Strand high impact scout rifle, and don't have much to really talk about. We did kind of touch on this last season. Now that they've added Slice in, I think that was maybe one of my recommendations, that I would have liked to have Slice added into this perk pool, which they have in column 3. And as we've been talking about it with our Better Devils Strand hand cannon, you know, Slice is a very solid perk. If you can proc this with, I think specifically Hunters can utilize this a lot more often. I'm certainly not disputing the fact that Warlocks and Titans can't use Slice, but because it's based on your class ability, it makes the next 5 hits within 80 seconds apply Sever to the targets, even if they are immune to damage as well. So more of a kind of utility perk for Hunters, but everyone can use Slice. In terms of column 4, though, still, you know, I think if we want to just go full Strand, you've got Hatchling, probably makes the most amount of sense. Again, maybe a little bit more, you know, pivots towards Warlocks having this as a handy perk to have, but, you know, Hunters and Titans can utilize Hatchling as well. Outside of that, you know, you've got Precision Instrument. If you're that type of, you know, Nightfall user that are using scout rifles at a kind of a longer range distance, got something like Slice or something else like Demo plus Precision Instrument, or Enlightened Action plus Precision Instrument, then this would probably be your go-to. I'm not particularly fond of high impact scouts. I know they are fairly, you know, they've got some utility, both in PvP and PvE, but I'm just personally, as a personal preference, I'm not a big fan of it. And I do recall seeing that when we first covered Guiding Sight. So, Impetus, you got any kind of highlights here?
I actually do. I did not at the start of the episode, but as I was looking at Better Devils, I was thinking to myself, oh, well, Slice in column 3, that would be perfect to pair with a Strategist in column 4, except Better Devils didn't have Strategist in column 4. It had it in column 3. So then I started looking at Strand primaries that had Slice and Strategist and which ones had them in separate columns for that combination. And it turns out the Guiding Sight is one of them. You get Slice column 3, Strategist column 4, and then I believe Imminence, which is a raid weapon, or our new raid SMG is, I think, the one other one. Let me just double check real quick here. Yes, that is the other Strand primary at this time that gets those 2 perks in separate columns. So if you want to lean into that class ability to sever enemy loop there, that would be an interesting thing to bring up about the Guiding Sight. Beyond that, though, that's my one highlight. I'm not really interested in the Guiding Sight beyond that unique interaction, but it is there and it is worth pointing out. Saint, anything to add?
No, high impact scouts used to be okay, but aggressives are taking that spot up pretty quick now these days. So I don't know. Maybe if we get a Strand aggressive.
Saints dreaming about the Strand aggressive already. Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's just where my mind is going. I mean, yeah, weird to see them change it up so much, kind of like Court said. Hatchling from a distance, Slice from a distance, you know, for sure there's value there. I don't know if I'll be using it a ton, but something, for sure. Only one weapon left here. And it's okay. We have got the Claws of the Wolf, and this has been seen a lot of talk in the PvP front, as this is the first time we've seen this weapon in a while. This is the first time we've seen a Void Pulse Rifle in a while, and by a while I mean Grid Skipper in Season of the Splicer, and that is pretty hard to get near impossible these days. So if you do not have a Grid Skipper, you never got a Grid Skipper, you like rapid fire pulses a lot, then I think that you may be interested in this weapon. The stats on it are not great. It loses out in most categories when you compare it to its other rapid fire siblings. It does have a couple of traits to offer, though, that I would be remiss if we didn't mention. In column 3, you've got Repulsor Brace and Perpetual Motion. Perpetual Motion just for the stat bump. Repulsor Brace if you're playing into this Void build. And then in column 4, we've got Destabilizing Rounds and Disruption Break. Disruption Break is a pretty strong trait, considering this is anti-barrier. Pulse Rifle is a thing this season. You're getting 50% increased kinetic damage to targets that have their shield broken by Disruption Break. You got a Secession, a Supremacy, a Mountaintop to capitalize on that. That is great. And then other than that, it's pretty much just go have some fun with stabilizing rounds. The stats on this are, again, they're just not very good. The base archetype of rapid fire frame pulse rifles is strong, though. So, I think it's a fine weapon to be using by all means if you were able to land a solid trait on it. It just does not have a ton of PvE focused stuff, honestly. And its one origin trait is Skulking Wolf, which has no effect in PvE. So, it's a strong PvE archetype, just despite that, does not have a lot of traits that are catered towards PvE. Court, any thoughts here?
If I can try and get a Repulsive Brace plus Destabilizing Rounds from my Gerfalcon's Hunter, then that would be great. I really love rapid fire frame pulse rifles. Obviously, pulse rifles across the board got big buffs for the final shape. They're in a really good spot. Pulse rifle anti-barrier right now. I do like that idea that you have there with Disruption Break, because that does proc off barrier shields and then swap to something like Mountaintop or Supremacy. But it is the origin trait, or the lack of PvE origin trait, is kind of what bums me out with Claws of the Wolf. It is my preferred archetype for PvP, so like I will be chasing this regardless because I want to get a kind of upgraded role for PvP. But yeah, just having no like additional origin trait just kind of bums me out. And yeah, the perks are just not quite there for PvE. Impetus, you got any thoughts here?
I can only echo both Court and Saint's thoughts on this. It is okay. And I think especially coming off of the high that is Elsie's rifle with its mammoth stat package, its insane perk pool, its fantastic PvE origin trait, its shiny variant. I mean, it's a deep and dark shadow that Void Pulse Rifle casts over all future Void Pulse Rifles, and I'm not sure that Claws can really escape that shadow, unfortunately. PvP wise, again, there's definitely a play there. I will certainly be chasing a Headseekers and Moment rule of that. I'm very excited to get my hands on that. But for PvE, yeah, I'm sticking just fine with my Elsie's Rifles rolls. So maybe next time Void Rapid Fire, maybe in 3 years, when the next one, when Grid Skipper gets reprised, we can all come back around and be like the Return of the King,
Thanks,
Claws
Mithrax.
Claws is not quite the Return of the King, unfortunately.
Instead, I just want to point out how egregious what Impetus is talking about right here is that the handling on Elsie's rifle, a high impact frame, is double that of Claws of the Wolf. 21 versus 42. How what? I just don't know, man. It's ridiculous how good that thing is.
And still obtainable too. I mean, and much more obtainable than our Iron Banner weapon here. You will be waiting a long while to get your hands on a Claws of the Wolf roll once this episode comes out. So, yeah, go have some fun in Onslaught. Go get an actually good Void Pulse rifle with a ton of great perks that we've already covered, and don't even worry your silly little head about Lord Saladin's Claws of the Wolf.
So to recap, from all these weapons that I've noticed is all of us are waiting for a Strand 180 hand cannon and a Strand aggressive scout rifle.
I wouldn't be mad.
Yeah, come on. We need to see them.
And a Strand double fire grenade launcher. Let's not forget.
Yes.
With that also starts with the letter W. Very important that it keeps to the trend here.
Something cowboy related as well.
Yeah. Whoa there, partner. That's the Strand double fire right there.
Oh man.
No, some good perks. Weapons in here. Some of these are going to be a little bit tricky to get or to obtain, to get some really good perks with them. But we have found some diamonds. Not even within the rough. It's just some diamonds within some okay weapons.
Yeah, I'm so
Part of
glad
the
to
course.
see Better Devils still be good, despite the fact that it's like way too old.
Yeah, that stat package is screaming fixed rolls for sure. Yeah, that is a big difference between Kept Confidence and Better Devils. Well, that wraps up our first kind of preview, look through, review of the playlist weapons. We'll be talking about some more next episode. Don't forget. Again, kind of doing a bit more of a truncated review while also taking some time to look at Riposte, Aisha's Care, and Shire's Wrath, as well as our new Act 2 weapons, of course, Aberrant Action, Corrasion, and Perfect Paradox. So that's up on the docket here. Again, if Bungie announces buffs to any other archetypes like high impact scout rifles, we'll be sure to freak out and review the guiding site here with a bit more of a positive note. But until then, my name is Impetus. Thank you so much for listening to episode 109. We, of course, want to give a shout out and very special thank you to our audio engineer, Autodidactos, for keeping us sounding crisp and professional each and every episode. You can find me in Discord and in Destiny by that name, Impetus, as well as lurking about on Twitter under the Pod versus Enemies handle. That's our group handle here. Court, where can our listeners find you?
Yeah, you can find me over in the socials and Discord as Court Projects. You can find my spreadsheets, among other fantastic spreadsheets, documentation from various other Destiny science folk, over on the D2 spreadsheets, Twitter, and the Linktree. And you can find me in-game trying to get a really solid roll of Better Devils with Saint. Saint, where can we find you?
Yep, you can find me by @Saint_Kabir, social media and Discord, hanging out in game and going against all my better judgment to play a bunch of comp this next week to get some honor rifle rolls. The things that you do, the things that you do for the podcast. Thanks for listening to another episode of PvE.